They say you should never look a predator in the eye. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, Griffin Miller didn't just look. She spoke. In the underworld of New York City, Salvatore Moretti was a ghost, a man who owned the police, the judges, and the streets. No one spoke to him unless spoken to. But when a tired 22-year-old waitress poured his wine and saw the heavy onyx ring on his finger, she didn't see a crime boss. She saw a ghost from her own past. She whispered 7 words that would freeze the blood of the most dangerous man in the city. "Sir, my mother has a ring like yours." What happened next wasn't just a crime story. It was a revelation that would burn the city to the ground. The rain in Brooklyn didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside the Velvet Room, an upscale steakhouse that sat uncomfortably on the border of gentrified Williamsburg and the old industrial yards, the air was thick with the smell of roasting garlic, expensive cologne, and fear. Griffin Miller adjusted her apron, wincing as the knot pressed against a bruise on her hip, a souvenir from bumping into a table during the lunch rush. She was 22, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. Her mother, Roman, was at home, coughing through another night of an illness the doctors couldn't quite name, but were happy to bill for. That's why Griffin was here, picking up a double shift on a Tuesday. "Table 4, the manager, Mr. Henderson, hissed, grabbing Griffin's arm. His face was pale, beads of sweat trapped in his receding hairline. "VIPs, do not, and I repeat, do not screw this up. You speak only when spoken to. You pour from the right, and you keep your eyes down." Griffin nodded, pulling her arm away. "Who is it?" "The mayor?" "Bigger," Henderson whispered. "Salvatore Moretti." The kitchen went silent. Even the dishwasher stopped clanking plates. The name Moretti wasn't just a name in New York. It was a frequency. He was the head of the ruling family, a man who had allegedly orchestrated the collapse of the docks in the 90s and survived 3 federal indictments without spending a night in a cell. Griffin took a deep breath, grabbed the bottle of 1995 Chateau Margaux, and walked out onto the floor. Table 4 was in the back, secluded by velvet ropes. 4 men sat there. 3 were built like vending machines, necks thick with muscle, eyes scanning the room for threats. But the 4th man, the one in the center, was different. Salvatore Moretti was in his late 50s, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Griffin made in a year. He had silver hair swept back impeccably and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent look of skepticism. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was staring at a glass of water, his expression unreadable. Griffin approached the table. Her hands were shaking, just a little. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice steady despite her pulse hammering in her throat. "I have the Margaux you requested." One of the bodyguards, a man with a broken nose named Luca, moved to stop her, but Salvatore raised a hand, a single finger lift. The bodyguard retreated. "Pour," Salvatore said. His voice was like gravel wrapped in silk. Griffin moved to his right. She uncorked the bottle with practiced efficiency. As she tilted the bottle, the sleeve of Salvatore's jacket pulled back slightly. There it was. It sat on his ring finger, heavy and absorbing the dim light of the chandelier. It was a signet ring, but not a standard one. It was black onyx, set in white gold. In the center of the stone was a distinct, hand-carved crest, a double-headed hawk clutching a single thorny rose. Griffin froze. The wine dribbled, a single drop splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth. The table went deathly quiet. Luca, the bodyguard, stood up halfway, his hand reaching inside his jacket. A stain on Moretti's table was usually a death sentence for a waiter's career, if not worse. "I am so sorry," Griffin gasped, reaching for a napkin. Salvatore didn't look at the stain. He looked at her. His eyes were the color of ice. "Leave it," he commanded. Griffin stopped. She looked at the ring again. She couldn't help it. The image of that hawk and the rose was burned into her earliest memories. She had seen it in the bottom of her mother's jewelry box, hidden beneath old receipts and broken necklaces. The silence stretched, agonizing and heavy. Griffin knew she should leave. She knew she should apologize and run, but the words tumbled out before her brain could filter them. "Sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. Salvatore looked up, his gaze intense. "What?" "My mother." Griffin swallowed hard, clutching the wine bottle to her chest like a shield. "My mother has a ring like yours." The reaction was instantaneous. The air left the room. Salvatore Moretti, the man who never flinched, went rigid. His hand, which had been resting on the table, curled into a fist, the knuckles turning white. "What did you say?" he asked. The volume didn't change, but the intensity doubled. "The ring," Griffin stammered, pointing a shaking finger. "The hawk and the rose. My mother. Roman. She keeps one just like it in her box. She told me never to touch it." Salvatore stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, a harsh sound that made the other patrons turn and look. He was tall, imposing, casting a shadow over Griffin. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron, but his hand was shaking. "Roman?" he rasped. "You said Roman?" "Yes," Griffin squeaked. "Roman Miller. Please, sir, you're hurting me." Salvatore didn't let go. He pulled her closer, ignoring his bodyguards who were now surrounding them to block the view of the other diners. He stared into Griffin's face, searching her eyes, her nose, the curve of her chin. It was as if he was looking for a ghost. "Get the car," Salvatore barked at Luca. "Boss?" Luca asked, confused. "We haven't ordered." "I said get the car," Salvatore roared, his composure shattering. He looked back at Griffin, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and wonder. "You're coming with me?" "No," Griffin said, pulling back. "I can't. Your shift is over," Salvatore said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Your life as a waitress is over. If Roman Miller is your mother, then we have a lot to talk about." He didn't wait for her consent. He began to drag her towards the exit. Griffin looked around for help, but Mr. Henderson was cowering behind the host stand, and the other diners looked away, terrified to intervene. As they stepped out into the rainy New York night, Griffin realized with a sinking heart that the stories were wrong. Salvatore Moretti wasn't a ghost. He was a storm, and she had just walked right into the eye of it. The ride was silent. Griffin sat in the back of a bulletproof Cadillac Escalade, squeezed between the leather door and Salvatore Moretti. He hadn't spoken a word since they left the restaurant. He just stared out the window at the blurring city lights, his thumb absent-mindedly rubbing the onyx ring on his finger. Griffin's mind was racing. Was she being kidnapped? Was her mother in trouble? Why did a mob boss care about a piece of jewelry her mum kept hidden in a velvet pouch? The car slowed as they pulled into a gated driveway in the Upper Saddle River area of New Jersey. The house wasn't a house. It was a fortress. High walls, cameras, and men patrolling with dogs. "Inside," Salvatore ordered as the car stopped. They brought her to a study that smelled of old paper and tobacco. Salvatore gestured for her to sit in a leather armchair. He didn't sit. He poured 2 glasses of brandy, his hands steady now. He handed one to her. "Drink," he said. "You look like you're going to pass out." Griffin took the glass but didn't drink. "I want to call my mum," she said, trying to summon the toughness she used when dealing with drunk customers at 2 a.m. "She'll be worried. Your mother knows better than to worry when the past comes knocking," Salvatore said darkly. He leaned against his mahogany desk, crossing his arms. "Tell me about the ring, Griffin. Exactly. Don't lie to me. I found it when I was 10, Griffin began, her voice shaky. "I was snooping in her room. It was heavy. Black stone. The hawk and the rose. When Mum caught me with it, she screamed. I'd never seen her so angry. She cried for hours afterward. She told me it was a mistake, a reminder of a life she ran away from." Salvatore closed his eyes for a moment, a look of pure pain crossing his face. "A mistake," he muttered. "Who are you?" Griffin demanded, emboldened by the brandy fumes. "Did you know her?" Salvatore opened his eyes. "Know her?" "Griffin, 24 years ago, Roman Rossi was the only thing in this world that mattered to me. We were everything." "Rossi?" Griffin frowned. "My mum's maiden name is Davis." "Davis is a lie," Salvatore said sharply. "Her name was Roman Rossi. She was the daughter of my father's consigliere. We grew up together. We fell in love. But in our world, love is a liability. There was a war coming. The Albanian syndicates were moving in on the 5 families. It was blood in the streets every day." He stood up and walked to a safe behind his desk. He spun the dial and pulled out an old, yellowing photograph. He tossed it onto Griffin's lap. It was a picture of a young couple on a boardwalk, laughing. The man was a young, handsome Salvatore, smiling in a way Griffin couldn't imagine him doing now. The woman. Griffin gasped. It was her mother. Younger, vibrant, with long dark hair, but undeniably her mother. "I gave her that ring the night I proposed," Salvatore said softly. "The hawk, for the Moretti power. The rose, for her beauty. But 2 days later my car was firebombed. I survived. But I knew if she stayed with me, she would die. So I did the only thing I could to save her." He looked at Griffin, his eyes haunted. "I told her I didn't love her. I told her I was cheating. I broke her heart so completely that she would leave the city. I made her hate me so she would live." Griffin felt tears prick her eyes. "She never told me." "She vanished," Salvatore continued. "I looked for her for years. Eventually I stopped. I thought she had moved on, married some accountant, lived a safe life. I never knew." He stepped closer, looking at Griffin with a sudden, terrifying intensity. "She was pregnant when she left, wasn't she?" Griffin's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know. My birthday is in July." Salvatore did the math instantly. November to July. The timeline fit perfectly. "You're mine," he whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "You are my daughter." Griffin shook her head, backing away into the chair. No, my father died before I was born. That's what she told me. He was a soldier." "I am a soldier," Salvatore said, "and I was dead to her." Before Griffin could process the earth-shattering revelation, the heavy oak door of the study burst open. Luca, the bodyguard, stumbled in, breathless. "Boss, we have a problem." Salvatore's demeanor shifted instantly from father to warlord. "I told you I was not to be disturbed." "It's Dante," Luca said, his face pale. "He knows." Salvatore's eyes narrowed. Dante was his nephew, the underboss, the man who was currently next in line to take over the family. The man who had been waiting for Salvatore to die for a decade. "Knows what?" Salvatore asked dangerously. "He knows about the girl," Luca said, gesturing to Griffin. "Someone at the restaurant talked. Dante knows you found a link to the past. He's already moving crews to Roman's house in Queens." Griffin screamed. "My mum! He's going to my mum!" Salvatore moved faster than Griffin thought possible. He grabbed a phone from his desk and barked orders. "Send the Alpha team to Queens. Address—" He looked at Griffin. 42nd Street, Sunnyside," she yelled. 42nd Street, Sunnyside. Secure Roman Miller. If anyone touches her, burn the block down." He slammed the phone down. He turned to Griffin. He pulled a heavy pistol from a drawer and tucked it into his waistband. He then took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled of expensive tobacco and gunpowder. "We are leaving," he said. "Where?" Griffin asked, trembling. "To war," Salvatore said. "Dante thinks he can take my family. He's about to find out why they call me the Butcher of Brooklyn." He grabbed her hand again, but this time it wasn't aggressive. It was protective. "Stay close to me, Griffin. Tonight, you learn what it means to be a Moretti." As they ran towards the garage, sirens began to wail in the distance. Griffin realized her quiet life of waiting tables and paying bills was gone. She was now the heiress to an empire of blood, and the wolves were already at the door. The Cadillac Escalade tore down the FDR drive, weaving through the late-night traffic with terrifying precision. Luca was behind the wheel, his eyes darting between the rear-view mirror and the road ahead. In the back, the silence between Salvatore and Griffin was louder than the siren wailing in the distance. Griffin clutched the oversized suit jacket around her shoulders. She was still wearing her waitress uniform, a black button-down stained with wine and sweat. She looked at the man sitting next to her. Salvatore Moretti was reloading a magazine for his pistol, his movements mechanical, practiced. "Where are we going?" Griffin asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "A place that doesn't exist," Salvatore replied, without looking up. "The books say it was condemned in '98. The city says it's a rat nest. We call it the Icebox." They exited the highway and plunged into the shadows of Hell's Kitchen. The car pulled into an alleyway behind an abandoned industrial laundry facility. The brickwork was covered in decades of soot and graffiti. Luca killed the lights, and the car rolled to a silent stop. "Inside," Salvatore commanded. "Keep your head down." They rushed through a rusted side door. Griffin expected a squatter's den, but the interior was a tactical command center. The windows were blacked out with steel plates. Monitors lined the far wall, displaying feeds from traffic cameras across the city. 3 men were already there, armed with AR-15s, pacing nervously. One of them, a bald man with a thick grey mustache, stepped forward. This was Frank, the Saint Russo, Salvatore's consigliere and oldest friend. "Sal," Frank said, his voice tight. "The streets are burning. Dante has put a bounty out. $5 million for your head, $2 million for the girl." Griffin gasped. $2 million for me? Salvatore ignored the money. "What about Roman? Did the Alpha team get to Queens?" Frank hesitated. He looked at Griffin, then back at Sal. "Alpha team is dead, Sal." The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Salvatore," Yale walked up to Frank, grabbing him by the lapels of his coat. "Say that again." "They hit the house in Sunnyside," Frank explained quickly. "Dante's men were already there. It was an ambush. 4 of our guys down. But the house was empty." Salvatore released Frank, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for 20 years. "She wasn't there. No. Neighbors say Roman works the night shift on Tuesdays, cleaning offices in Midtown." "She's at the Hearst Tower," Griffin interrupted. Everyone turned to look at her. "She cleans the 14th floor on Tuesday nights. She doesn't get off until 2 a.m. Salvatore looked at his watch. It was 1:15 a.m. "Luca," Salvatore barked, "get the SUV ready. We're going to Midtown." "Boss, it's suicide," Luca argued. "Midtown is crawling with cops and Dante's spotters. If we show up there in a convoy, we're dead." "That's my wife out there," Salvatore roared, the mask of the cool mob boss slipping to reveal the desperate man underneath. "And that is her mother." He pointed to Griffin. "I don't care if the entire NYPD is parked out front. We get her." Griffin stepped forward. She was terrified, her knees shaking. But something in Salvatore's desperation sparked a strange courage in her. "I can track her." Salvatore looked at her. "What?" Griffin pulled her cracked iPhone out of her apron pocket. "We share locations. It's a safety thing because I walk home late. Find my friends." She tapped the screen. A blue dot pulsed on the map. It wasn't at the Hearst Tower. It was moving, fast, down 8th Avenue. "She's in a cab," Griffin said, panic rising. "She's heading toward Penn Station." "She's running," Salvatore realized. "She must have heard about the attack on the house. She's trying to get on a train." "Penn Station," Frank said grimly. "That's a choke point. If Dante knows she's running, he'll have men at every entrance. It's a kill box." Salvatore turned to the weapons rack on the wall. He grabbed a heavier vest and tossed it to Luca. He then turned to Griffin. He took the onyx ring off his finger, the ring that had started it all, and pressed it into her hand. "Take this," he said. Griffin looked at the heavy black stone. "Why?" "Because if I die tonight," Salvatore said, his voice deadly serious. "That ring is the only thing that will keep the wolves from eating you alive. Show it to the commission. Tell them you are the blood of Salvatore Moretti. They are bound by the old laws to protect you." "You're not going to die," Griffin said, surprised by her own conviction. Salvatore offered a rare, grim smile. It made him look like the man in the photograph for a fleeting second. "Let's hope you're right. Luca, Frank, lock and load. We're going to Penn Station. Underscore, 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 underscore." Penn Station at 1:45 a.m. was a purgatory of tired commuters, homeless drifters, and tourists dragging heavy suitcases. The fluorescent lights hummed with a sick, yellow energy. Salvatore, Luca, and Griffin entered through the 34th Street entrance. They moved in a tight formation. Salvatore had his coat buttoned to hide the heckler and Coke pistol at his waist, but his eyes were scanning every face in the crowd. "Check the app," Salvatore whispered. Griffin looked at her phone. "She's close, near the Amtrak ticket booths." They pushed through the crowd. Griffin's heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every stranger looked like a hitman. Every sudden movement made her flinch. Then she saw her. Roman Miller stood near a pillar, clutching a battered red suitcase. She looked older than the photo Salvatore had shown Griffin, her face lined with years of hard work and worry. But her eyes were the same, dark, expressive, and currently filled with terror. She was looking up at the departure board, trembling. "Mom!" Griffin screamed. Roman turned. When she saw Griffin, relief washed over her face, followed immediately by horror when she saw the man standing behind her daughter. "Sal," Roman whispered, the name falling from her lips like a prayer. Salvatore stopped 10 feet away. For a moment, the chaos of the station faded. He just looked at her, the woman he had pushed away to save, the woman who had raised his child in secret. "Roman," he said hoarsely, "we have to go. Now." "You found us," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I ran so far, Sal. I ran so far." "I know," he said, stepping forward, "and I'm sorry, but Dante is coming. We have to move." Before Roman could respond, the glass of the ticket booth behind her shattered. Crack! The sound of the gunshot echoed through the cavernous station. People screamed. The crowd dropped to the floor in a wave of panic. "Get down!" Salvatore yelled, tackling Roman and Griffin behind a concrete pillar. Bullets began to chew up the floor around them. Concrete dust sprayed into the air. "3 shooters!" Luca yelled, firing back blindly over the top of a trash can. "Second level, near the escalator." Salvatore peeked out. Up on the balcony overlooking the main concourse, 3 men in heavy coats were firing suppressed submachine guns. In the center of them stood a younger man with slicked-back hair and a cruel, handsome face, Dante Moretti. He looked down at the chaos like a Roman emperor watching a gladiator match. He spotted Salvatore pinned behind the pillar. "Uncle Sal," Dante's voice boomed over the screams of the civilians. "Retirement looks good on you. Why don't you die like a good old man?" "Luca, cover fire," Salvatore ordered. Luca popped up and unleashed a volley of shots. The shooters on the balcony ducked. "We need to get to the tracks," Salvatore told Roman and Griffin. "Track 14. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the subway. It's our only way out." "I can't run fast," Roman cried, clutching her chest. "Sal, my heart." Salvatore grabbed her face in his hands. "You don't have to run. I'll carry you if I have to. But we are leaving this station together. Do you understand?" He looked at Griffin. "Stay between me and Luca. Don't stop moving." "Go!" Salvatore yelled. They broke cover. Luca sprayed fire at the balcony, forcing Dante's men to keep their heads down. Salvatore grabbed Roman's hand, pulling her toward the gate for track 14. Griffin sprinted alongside them. They crashed through the gate, stumbling down the stairs towards the platform. A train was idling there, empty and dark. "Down the platform! To the end!" Salvatore shouted. They were halfway down the platform when the door at the top of the stairs burst open. Dante's men poured through. Bullets sparked against the metal of the train. Luca grunted, stumbling as a round clipped his shoulder. "Luca!" Griffin screamed. "Keep moving!" Luca roared, turning around and firing his pistol with one hand. "I'll hold them here." "No!" Salvatore stopped. "No one gets left behind." "Boss, go!" Luca smiled, blood staining his teeth. "It's been an honor." Luca charged back toward the stairs, firing wildly, drawing all the enemy fire onto himself. He bought them 5 seconds. 5 seconds was all they needed. Salvatore dragged Roman and Griffin off the end of the platform, into the darkness of the train tunnel. They ran along the gravel, the only light coming from the distant signals. Behind them, the gunfire intensified, then suddenly stopped. Griffin knew what that meant. She bit her lip to keep from sobbing. Luca was gone. They ran for what felt like miles. Finally, Salvatore found a rusted service door. He kicked it open, revealing a damp, narrow staircase leading up. They emerged into the cool night air of a back alley in Chelsea. They were miles from the station, covered in soot and sweat. Salvatore collapsed against a dumpster, sliding down until he was sitting on the wet pavement. He was breathing hard, clutching his side. Griffin realized for the first time that his suit was wet with blood. "Sal!" Roman dropped to her knees beside him. "You're hit." "Just a scratch." Salvatore winced, moving his hand. It wasn't a scratch. A bullet had caught him just above the hip. "We need a doctor," Griffin said, panic rising again. "We can't go to a hospital. They'll report it." Salvatore looked at Roman. His eyes were glassy. "Do you remember? Dr. Evans, the vet?" Roman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "The one who stitched you up in '99. Is he still alive?" "He owes me," Salvatore wheezed. "He's in Queens. We have to keep moving." He tried to stand but stumbled. Griffin caught him on one side, Roman on the other. "We got you," Griffin said. The weight of him was immense, heavy with muscle and the burden of his sins. "Griffin," Salvatore whispered as they limped towards the main road to hail a cab. "You did good back there. You have the blood." Griffin didn't know if that was a compliment or a curse. She felt the heavy onyx ring in her pocket, cold against her thigh. "Why is Dante doing this?" Griffin asked, her voice hard. "Why does he want us dead so badly?" Salvatore looked at her, his vision blurring. "Because," he rasped, "Dante knows the truth. The ring isn't just jewelry, Griffin. It's the key to the vault in Zurich, the vault that holds the blackmail files on every judge, politician, and cop in New York. Whoever holds the ring controls the city." He looked at Roman, "and he knows. He knows I left the ring to you in my will 20 years ago. As long as you two are alive, he can never truly be king." Griffin looked at her mother, then at the dying man in her arms. The waitress from Brooklyn was gone. In her place was a woman who realized she was holding the keys to the kingdom, and the devil was coming to take them back. "Let's get him to the vet," Griffin said, her voice turning to steel. "And then we're going to kill Dante." Dr. Evans operated on Salvatore on a metal table usually reserved for Great Danes. The back room of the veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and dog food. Griffin sat in the waiting area, watching the street through the blinds. She held a scalpel she had swiped from a tray. It felt small and silly compared to the guns Dante's men had, but it was something. Roman came out of the back room, wiping blood from her hands with a paper towel. She looked exhausted. "He's going to make it," Roman said softly. "The bullet missed the artery. He's tough. He always was." Griffin turned to her mother. "Why didn't you tell me? All these years. You told me my father was a dead soldier." Roman sat down, sighing deeply. "He was a soldier, Griffin. Just not the kind that fights for a country. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to be Griffin Miller, not Griffin Moretti. The Moretti name is a target. You saw tonight. That life, it eats people." "He said he broke your heart to save you," Griffin said. "Is that true?" Roman nodded slowly. "I didn't know it at the time. I hated him for years. I thought he was a monster who used me. It wasn't until I saw the news reports, saw the cars blowing up, his friends dying, I realized he pushed me out of the blast zone. But by then, I had you, and I couldn't risk going back. Well, we're back now, Griffin said bitterly. The back door opened. Salvatore limped out. He was pale, wearing a clean shirt the vet had given him, but he was standing upright. The sheer force of will in the man was terrifying. We can't stay here, Salvatore said. Dante will tear the city apart, looking for us. We need to go on the offensive. Offensive? Roman cried. Sal, look at you. You can barely walk. We need to leave the country. We can go to Canada. No, Salvatore said. If we run, we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Dante won't stop. He can't. He's too deep in with the Albanians now. He promised them the city. Salvatore looked at Griffin. Give me the ring. Griffin reached into a pocket and handed it to him. He slid it back onto his finger. He looked at it for a moment, then looked at his daughter. There is a meeting tomorrow night, Salvatore said. The commission, the heads of the 5 families. They meet once a year to settle disputes. It's neutral ground, no weapons, sacred territory. Where? Griffin asked. The Glass House, Salvatore said. A private penthouse overlooking Central Park. I'm going to walk in there and challenge Dante. He'll kill you before you get in the door, Roman said. He can't, Salvatore said. Not on commission ground. If he spills blood there, the other families will execute him on the spot. It's the only rules we have left. So you just talk? Griffin asked skeptically. No, Salvatore's eyes gleamed. I challenge him to the vendetta di sangue. Blood feud, single combat. Winner takes the family. Loser goes into the ground. You're injured, Griffin shouted. You can't fight him. I don't have to fight him with my fists, Salvatore said, a cunning look crossing his face. I fight him with the truth. But I need you, Griffin. Me? I need you to walk in there with me. I need you to present the ring. You are the proof that Dante is a usurper. You are the proof that I have a legitimate heir. Griffin stared at him. You want me to walk into a room full of Mafia bosses and tell them I'm the princess? I want you to walk in there and tell them you are the queen, Salvatore corrected. The plan was madness. It was suicide. But as Griffin looked at her mother's terrified face and her father's wounded body, she knew he was right. Running meant dying slowly. Fighting meant a chance at living. Okay, Griffin said. I'll do it. But on one condition. Anything, Salvatore said. When this is over, Griffin said, I get to choose. I choose if I want this life or not. You don't decide for me. Mum doesn't decide. I decide. Salvatore looked at her with a newfound respect. Deal. The Glass House was the unofficial name for the penthouse of a super-tall skyscraper on Park Avenue. It was one of the few places in New York that looks down on the clouds. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a 360-degree view of a city that shimmered like a bed of diamonds. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. A massive circular table made of black marble dominated the room. Seated around it were the heads of the 5 families, men who controlled unions, ports, and construction contracts from Staten Island to the Bronx. Griffin stood at the elevator doors, her heart thudding against her ribs. She was no longer wearing her waitress uniform. Roman had found an old black dress in her suitcase, simple, elegant, and severe. Griffin had pulled her hair back tight. She looked like a judge. Salvatore stood beside her. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes burned with a feverish intensity. Remember, Salvatore whispered as the elevator chimed, fear is a choice. Do not choose it. The doors slid open. The conversation at the table stopped instantly. Every head turned. Standing at the far end of the room, sipping a scotch, was Dante. He looked immaculate in a midnight blue tuxedo, a smirk playing on his lips. Uncle Sal, Dante called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. I'm surprised you could walk this far. I had a wheelchair ready for you. Salvatore ignored him. He limped towards the table. Griffin walked beside him, matching his pace. She felt the eyes of the most dangerous men in America on her. She didn't look down. She looked straight at the chairman, Don Falcone, an 80-year-old man breathing with the help of an oxygen tank. "Chairman," Salvatore said, his voice raspy but firm, "I come to claim my seat." "Your seat is taken," Dante interrupted, stepping forward. "By right of succession. You have been absent, Sal. You are weak, and you brought a civilian, a waitress, into the Holy of Holies. That alone is grounds for execution." The other dons murmured in agreement. Bringing an outsider was a cardinal sin. "She is not a civilian," Salvatore said, his voice booming. "She is my daughter. My blood. Griffin Moretti." Silence rippled through the room. Dante laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A bastard daughter? You think that saves you? The code says the heir must be groomed. She serves pasta, Sal. She doesn't run an empire." "She holds the key," Salvatore said. He nodded to Griffin. Griffin stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but she clasped them together to hide it. She raised her right hand. The onyx ring sat on her thumb. It was too big for her finger, but the crest of the hawk and the rose was unmistakable. "The ring of the consigliere," Don Falcone wheezed, sitting up straighter. "We thought it was lost." "It was never lost," Griffin said, her voice clear. "It was waiting." She placed a small USB drive on the table, one Salvatore had given her in the car. "My father told me that whoever holds the ring holds the insurance. This drive contains the Zurich ledgers. Every bribe, every payoff, every body buried by this commission in the last 30 years. The dons went rigid. This was the nuclear option. Mutual assured destruction. "If anything happens to my father or me," Griffin said, channeling every ounce of rage she felt for the life that had been stolen from her, "this information goes to the FBI, the IRS, and the New York Times automatically. The ring is the authorization key. Only I can stop the upload." Dante's face twisted in fury. He realized he had been outmaneuvered. He couldn't kill them without destroying himself. "She's bluffing!" Dante yelled. "She's a scared little girl." "Check your tablets," Griffin said coldly. The dons looked at their screens. A notification had appeared on their secure servers. "Upload pending, 0:59 seconds. "Call it off," Falcone ordered, looking at Dante with sudden hostility. "Dante, stand down! Salvatore is the don." "No!" Dante screamed. He snapped. The arrogance that had fueled him for years shattered. He reached into his tuxedo jacket. "No weapons!" Falcone shouted. But Dante didn't care about rules anymore. He pulled a compact pistol, aiming directly at Salvatore. "If I can't have the crown," Dante snarled, "no one can." Everything happened in slow motion. Salvatore tried to move in front of Griffin, but his injured leg buckled. Griffin froze. Bang! The glass wall behind Griffin shattered, a spiderweb of cracks obscuring the city view. Griffin checked her chest. No blood. She looked at Salvatore. He was fine. She looked at Dante. Dante was standing still, a look of profound confusion on his face. A small red bloom was spreading on the white shirt of his tuxedo, right over his heart. He crumpled to the floor. Behind him, Luca stood in the doorway of the emergency stairs. He was battered, one arm in a sling, his face a mask of bruises, holding a smoking revolver. He hadn't died at the train station. He had crawled through hell to get here. "I told you, boss," Luca wheezed, leaning against the doorframe. "I'd hold them off." The room was silent, save for the wind whistling through the bullet hole in the glass. Don Falcone looked at the body of Dante, then at Griffin. He nodded slowly. "The succession is resolved," Falcone rasped. "Long live the Morettis." 3 months later, the winter wind whipped off the Hudson River, rattling the windows of the corner office on the 40th floor of the Hudson Yards Tower. The sign on the frosted glass door no longer read a shell company name. It read, Moretti Logistics and Development. Griffin Miller, now legally Griffin Moretti, sat at the head of a mahogany table that was long enough to land a plane on. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than her mother's entire yearly rent in Queens. The heavy onyx ring sat on her right hand, tapping a rhythmic, hollow sound against the wood. Across from her sat Vinny the Hammer Giamoro, a union rep for the dock workers who looked like he had been carved out of stale provolone cheese. He was sweating. "Look, Miss Moretti," Vinny said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "We have an understanding. Your father and I. We always did business a certain way. The crates come in, we look the other way. Envelopes get passed. It's tradition." Griffin didn't smile. She didn't blink. She simply opened a manila folder in front of her. "Tradition is dead, Vinny. We are moving into construction materials, legitimate imports, marble from Italy, steel from Pennsylvania, no more special crates from Colombia." Vinny chuckled nervously. "That's cute. But the boys on the dock? They need their cut. If the envelopes stop, the cranes stop. That's just physics." In the corner of the room, Salvatore Moretti sat in a high-backed leather chair. He was thinner now, leaning on a polished cane made of black walnut. At Vinny's threat, Salvatore's hand twitched toward his hip, a reflex honed over 40 years of violence. Griffin saw the movement. She raised a single finger. "Stay down." She turned her gaze back to Vinny. "You're threatening a work stoppage?" "I'm negotiating," Vinny smirked. Griffin slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This isn't a negotiation. It's an eviction notice." Vinny picked it up, squinting. "What is this?" "That," Griffin said, her voice cool and dangerously calm, "is a forensic audit of your pension fund. It turns out, Vinny, that you've been borrowing from the retirees to pay for your mistress's condo in Boca Raton and your gambling debts in Atlantic City." Vinny's face went the color of ash. "Where did you get this?" "I have better accountants than you have lawyers," Griffin said. "Now here is how the new physics works. You are going to sign the new labor contract at the market rate. Then you are going to retire. Today. You will cite health reasons. If you don't, I send this paper to the district attorney, and then I send a copy to the wives of the men whose pensions you stole." Griffin leaned forward, her eyes flashing with the same cold fire that her father was famous for. "And trust me, Vinny, the DA will put you in a cell. The wives, they'll tear you apart with their bare hands." Vinny looked at the paper, then at Salvatore, then back at Griffin. He realized with a sinking feeling that the old days of broken kneecaps were gone. This was worse. This was total destruction. He signed the contract with a shaking hand. "Get out," Griffin said. Vinny scrambled out of the room like the devil was snapping at his heels. When the door clicked shut, the silence in the room was heavy. Salvatore let out a long, low whistle. "I would have just broken his nose," Salvatore admitted, standing up and limping over to the window. "It's faster. And then the union strikes. The cops come sniffing. And we lose the Midtown contract," Griffin countered, closing the folder. "My way keeps the cash flowing. Your way keeps the blood flowing. We're in the cash business now, Dad." Salvatore looked out at the city, a city he used to rule with fear, now watching his daughter rule it with leverage. He looked at her with a mixture of pride and something akin to fear. "You're scary, Griffin. You know that? You took to this life fast." "I didn't take to the life," Griffin said, standing up and walking to him. She adjusted his tie, a gesture of intimacy she never would have dreamed of 3 months ago. "I just stopped running from it. The world is full of wolves. I just decided to be the one holding the leash." "The commission is nervous," Salvatore said quietly. "They say you're changing things too quickly, cleaning up the money, cutting ties with the drug trade. They think you're soft." "Let them think it," Griffin said. "Soft is safe. Soft is underestimated. By the time they realize I own the banks that hold their mortgages, it'll be too late." The intercom buzzed. It was the receptionist. "Miss Moretti, your mother is on line 1. She says don't be late for dinner, or she's feeding your portion to the dog." Griffin smiled, a real, genuine smile that cracked the Ice Queen facade. "Tell her we're leaving now. underscore 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 underscore. The destination wasn't a fancy penthouse or a secluded mansion. It was the Velvet Room in Williamsburg. Griffin had bought the building 2 weeks after the shootout at the glass house. She hadn't bought it to close it down. She bought it to keep it exactly as it was. The restaurant was closed to the public for the night. Inside, the smell of garlic, rosemary, and roasting lamb filled the air, a scent that used to smell like work to Griffin, but now smelled like victory. In the kitchen, Roman Miller was stirring a massive pot of sauce. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing her old jeans and a sweater, humming along to a Sinatra song playing on the radio. "You're late," Roman scolded without turning around, as Griffin and Salvatore walked in. "Traffic on the BQC," Salvatore said, hanging his coat on the rack. He moved to the counter, grabbed a piece of bread, and dipped it into the pot. Roman smacked his hand with a wooden spoon. "Out. Go sit down." "You too, Your Majesty," she winked at Griffin. Griffin sat at table 4, the table where it all began. The back door opened, and Luca walked in. He looked different. The sling was gone, though he walked with a slight hitch in his step. The scars on his face from the train station shootout had healed into jagged white lines that gave him a permanent scowl, but his eyes were bright. He wasn't carrying a gun tonight. He was carrying a crate of wine. 1995 Chateau Margaux, Luca announced, placing the bottle on the table. "Found a supplier who had a case left." "Pour it," Griffin said, "but try not to spill it this time." They all laughed, a sound that felt miraculous given the bloodshed that had brought them here. As Luca poured the wine, Griffin looked around the table. Her mother, the survivor who hid a king's ransom in a jewelry box for 20 years. Her father, the retired warlord learning to live without a war. And Luca, the soldier who had walked through fire for a family he wasn't born into. Salvatore raised his glass. His hand, usually so steady, trembled just slightly. Not from age, but from emotion. "To Roman," Salvatore said, his voice thick, "for keeping the secret." "To the ring," Luca added. "To the future," Roman said softly. They looked at Griffin. She held her glass up, the ruby liquid catching the light. She looked at the onyx ring on her finger, the hawk and the rose, war and beauty, power and grace. She finally understood what the crest meant. It wasn't about dominance, it was about balance. "To family," Griffin said, "the one we're born with, and the one we build." They drank. The wine tasted like velvet and earth. "So," Roman said, serving the pasta, "now that you've conquered New York, what's next? Are you going to run for mayor?" Salvatore snorted. "Don't insult her. The mayor works for us." "Actually," Griffin said, twirling her fork, "I was thinking about the West Coast. The ports in Los Angeles are a mess. They need management." Salvatore stopped eating. He looked at her, his eyes widening. "LA. The Triads run LA. They run it badly." Griffin shrugged. "I think they could use a consultant." Salvatore leaned back in his chair and started to laugh. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh that echoed off the brick walls. God help them. God help them all. After dinner, Griffin stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The snow had started to fall again, large flakes drifting down to cover the grime of the city streets. She walked to the edge of the sidewalk. A black SUV was idling there, waiting. But Griffin didn't get in immediately. She looked down the street toward the subway station. She could see the ghosts of her past life walking there. The tired waitress counting tips, the girl afraid of the dark, the daughter who didn't know her own name. She took the onyx ring off her finger. She held it up to the street lamp. The black stone seemed to absorb the light, holding the darkness within it, so she didn't have to carry it in her heart. She realized then that the Mafia princess story was wrong. She wasn't a princess. Princesses are rescued. Princesses inherit things they didn't earn. She had walked into the fire. She had stood in the glass house and stared down a gun. She had saved her father and redeemed her mother. She slid the ring back on. It fit perfectly. "Miss Moretti," Luca called from the car. "Everything okay?" Griffin turned back. Her face was set, her eyes clear and sharp as diamonds. "Everything is perfect, Luca," she said. "Call the pilot. Tell him to fuel up the jet. We're going to California in the morning." "Business or pleasure?" Luca asked, opening the door. Griffin smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had finally found her hunting ground. "Strictly business, Luca. Strictly business." She slid into the back seat of the car. The door closed with a heavy, final thud, sealing out the cold, sealing out the past, and sealing her fate as the new queen of the American underworld. The engine roared to life, and the car disappeared into the white, snowy night, leaving only tire tracks that would be gone by morning, just like the enemies who dared to cross her. And that is how a dropped bottle of wine and a mother's secret brought down an empire and built a new one. Griffin Miller walked into that restaurant a servant and walked out a queen. It reminds us that sometimes the things we hide in the bottom of our jewelry boxes are the very things that define who we truly are. Salvatore Moretti found his redemption not in power, but in the daughter he never knew he had. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, family, and the grit of the New York underworld, please smash that like button. It helps the channel immensely. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Share this video with a friend who loves a good twist. What would you do if you found out your parents were secret royals?